Historically, video games have never really been emotionally complex. Beyond a quick setup of the save the princess from turtles or rescue the president from ninjas variety, there wasn't much need and a grander narrative. John Carmack, lead programmer of the original Doom, summed it up best. Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important. For about a decade or so, games weren't something that you became emotionally invested in, and they certainly weren't anything to cry over. That is until Final Fantasy VII hit gamers with one of the most iconic and emotionally shocking moments in gaming with the death of a beloved party member, marking the first time it was acceptable to admit that a game made you cry. Since then, there have been several leaps in games technology and storytelling. The Last of Us offered a harrowing, apocalyptic journey of redemption akin to The Road, and Metal Gear Solid 3 is the closest thing gaming has to a Greek tragedy. Despite all this though, I've never cried at a video game. I don't wear that fact like a badge of honour, and I'm not an emotionless robot either. Films make me cry all the time. I get teary-eyed watching The Green Mile, It's a Wonderful Life, and just thinking about the Iron Giant makes me start to well up. Superman. But even my girlfriend, who infamously has a heart of stone when it comes to films, has cried while playing more games than me. I love games. I dare say they're my favourite medium, so I wanted to ask the question, why don't games make me cry? Firstly, I think there's a collective, unspoken understanding amongst players and developers alike that games are meant to be fun. Games have always strived to offer a power fantasy to players. They're a form of escapism to distract you from the day job you hate. You boot up a game like Resident Evil 4, and you want the bad man's head to go boom, and you want to feel good about it. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Outside of the indie gaming scene, there just aren't a wealth of games out there that are a total bummer to play, because they're going to be incredibly tough to market to a mainstream gaming audience. The biggest exception being The Last of Us, which embraced its brooding atmosphere to deliver a wonderfully emotional experience. Frankly, if you didn't feel anything after the game's opening, then I'm afraid you're legally dead. Moody games like this really are the exception to the rule though, since so many other games are committed to putting a smile on your face. Subconsciously, I'm aware that in the eyes of the public, there's still a social stigma to admitting that a dumb piece of entertainment made you cry, and in turn that makes me feel guilty and second guess my emotional state while playing. And that kind of self-awareness neatly brings me on to my next point. Deep down, whenever I'm playing a game, I feel like I'm hyper-aware of the fact that I'm playing a game.
These graphics sure are realistic.
Graphics have come a long way to hide this fact, but tiny little things like menu pop-ups, tutorials, and worst of all glitches can break the immersion and remind me that I'm not a plucky hero experiencing an epic story. I'm just some bloke sat in a dark room with a controller in my hand. Obviously, the amount these little things can cause bother varies from person to person, and it's a truth we've all come to accept as gamers. But it's easy to remember the artificiality of the experience when stuff like this happens, and that can strain any emotional connection you're trying to make. Another more psychological reason to why gamers don't cry is perhaps because we're generally thinking more logically while playing, so we're less susceptible to emotions. When you're watching a film, your mind is at ease, and you look forward to being swept up in the cinematic experience. When you're gaming though, you're like, whoa, where did that guy come from? Which gun do I want? Can I justify using a mega elixir? Gaming by default demands so much more input from the audience. Stuff like motor functionality and cognitive decision making rule your mind, making you efficient at problem solving and objective completing. There's only so much visual stimulus our mind can dedicate attention to. Like a soldier in battle, your emotions are suppressed, and there's no time for tears in the heat of the moment. This is one of the reasons why when an action game pulls an emotional sucker punch, that moment doesn't quite land. There has to be enough transitional time for the mind to reset between the high-octane gameplay and the unfolding melodrama. Slower paced games like To the Moon and Everyone's Gone to the Rapture smartly don't bombard the player with information, giving the player room to get into a relaxed state and dedicate more thought power to how the game makes them feel. All of this is not to say that it's impossible for games to make us feel for the characters and the world. Some of the strongest emotional connections I've felt while playing have been a result of when games merge story and themes with their gameplay mechanics. I'm talking about games like Undertale, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, and Florence. All of these games take advantage of the interactive nature of games and use their mechanics as an extension of the narrative. Not only are these games playing with your expectations, but it allows us to get deeper into the headspace of the characters and empathise with their emotions, which in turn makes me more emotionally invested in the experience. I bring this up because the closest the game has ever come to making me cry was when What Remains of Edith Finch used its mechanics to tell a deeply affecting short story about a pair of brothers and a garden swing. You control your momentum by controlling both legs with each thumbstick, as you aim to put the old childhood myth about making it all the way around the swing to the test. The ending is as inevitable as it is tragic, but that's exactly why it felt so poignant. Marrying gameplay with story is one of the most effective ways to get an emotional response from the player, and if any game is going to make me cry, it's likely going to be because of this. While graphics and marketing want to convince you that games are the future, the reality is that compared to books, music and film, games as a medium is still very much in its infancy. The mainstream perception of games is still that they're bombastic, brain-melting bits of entertainment, so there's still a level of shame attached to publicly admitting a game made you cry. But we've come a long way from the time that John Carmack gave that quote. Developers and game writers are rapidly learning, and the medium is constantly breaking boundaries. Every year we get games with increasingly remarkable stories to experience and characters to share journeys with. Not only is the stigma dissolving, but games are getting better and better at crafting an experience to tug at your heartstrings. So while no game has made me cry, I'm sincerely looking forward to the game that does.